Good morning, and I guess this is what we're doing today. Welcome to AYA Social Studies Day 12. In today's class, Junior Achievement League has been postponed to next Thursday. Um, Current events discussion is going to be moved online. Feminism in the classroom will be briefly discussed here and then moved online. Lesson plan instruction will be briefly discussed here and then moved online. So we're going to talk about the protest held after San Francisco Archbishop tells teachers to follow church teachings. And then we're going to talk about the Chris Paul incident, which is kind of an interesting dialogue. I mean, there's a couple of big things happening there, so check out the forums for that information. So the questions that we're looking at, big questions, are what place does feminism have in the classroom? And this is an interesting question because of some of the things that we discussed in the last class about, we have these perceptions of feminism being predominantly a militant activity where the people are the kind of the male-hating chauvinistic feminist kind of or not chauvinistic, misandrist, feminist kind of naughty things. And interesting question, do male teachers need to prove their feminist credibility more than female teachers? So there's this perception that men are callous and rude and ignorant of women's issues, but does that mean that you have to go above and beyond? And what does going above and beyond mean anyway? And then finally, this last question, what value does feminism, and we're probably going to have to talk about the current era of feminism here, but what does it have value for in the social studies classroom in the 21st century? I mean, we're living in a era that was decreed by the misogynists as a post-gender world, so what does feminism give to us now? Now, the meat of this presentation, this is all going to be discussed in the forum further, but the meat of the presentation is here in this lesson plan. So we're going to be looking at lesson plan template 1, and we're going to be looking at content standards and academic language. So we talked last class about lesson focus or major goal, and I see some of you posting in that forum. And then learning objectives, and now we're going to talk about content standards and academic language objectives. So content standards. Now, the state tells you that you need to go to the new learning standards and then to your what you're going to teach. But in all reality, if you're teaching chronologically and if you're paying attention to your standards, you can kind of design a good lesson and then make sure that you're hitting the standards. Make sure that the standards that you're hitting, you are hitting all of the ODE standards. Maybe make a chart or something. But as you're designing lessons, you can go either way, either from the standards to the content or from the content and see where it fits in the standards. Always with the idea in mind that, if your content cannot fit your standards at all, save that lesson. Don't throw it away. Save it for a different content area because maybe you have a great lesson about Asia and it just doesn't fit into the U.S. history content. When you're looking at standards, ask how many Common Core English Language Arts standards you can add in, and the answer to that is usually a lot. Are there any other standard content areas that you can add in? And then you need to identify specifically and written out all the way what are the new learning standards for social studies that you're using. Don't just at the beginning, in the first top part of your lesson plan, don't just tell me one or two numbers or whatever. I want the whole thing written out. I want it very clearly stated what your standards are. Now, what is the academic language? Academic language is a concept that a lot of students get hung up on. And academic language is just the vocabulary and syntax that students are using discussing specific ideas. So academic content language for this lesson might be learning standards or vocabulary or syntax or Common Core. I mean, those are things that are related to what you're doing in this class, and you're going to be using that vocabulary. Now, in the secondary situation, you're going to be teaching students to use words like inquiry and analyze and primary and secondary, and those are kind of some of the general terms. But you're also going to be talking about credit, mortgage, equity, and personal finance. In world history, you're going to be talking about like Reichstag and um, Blitzkrieg and all of those, in World War II. So be cognizant of the vocabulary associated with your lesson. And then you ask yourself, how will students do this? How are they going to acquire these language skills during the lesson? Are you just going to teach a vocabulary term and then drop it so that they have to define it later? Which is something that you probably all did. You probably all had a vocabulary sheet with Blitzkrieg and Reichstag and all of those, Nazi terms on them when you were studying World War II. But in the modern issue, when we're doing teaching today, we ask the question, how will students use this language? So it's literally using the language in class instead of just learning the vocabulary and parroting back the vocabulary. How are students going to be using that language? So work, and this is our third final form for the day. Identify the ODE New Learning Standards in Social Studies that you plan to use. Identify the Common Core State Standards Organization's ELA standards that you plan to use. Then you're going to list the ACL words your students will learn use. Identify the ways you will have the students using the academic content language. ACL stands for academic content language in this setting, which is some more academic content language. So that phrase itself in this lesson is academic content language, because I'm expecting you to talk about academic content language. Does that make sense? I'm going to be posting the forums here soon. I had hoped to get a video solution for today's lesson. That did not pan out. It seems like your Thursday class is not destined to meet. So here we go. We're having fun. We're doing lots of good work. Again, please email me if you have any comments, concerns, or questions.